till we see YouTube, and then we might. Okay, I'm ready. I'm kidding.
Give me your name and spell it for me, please.
Okay, Elmaree Gordon, and it's spelled Elmaree, Gordon, Gordon.
Now, Ms. Gordon, do you give us permission to use this at the archive and other ways of promoting Southside and the African American community in Dothan?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Ms. Gordon, tell me about your experience growing up on the South Side.
When I first remember being me, I was living on Southside. When my father passed, we were born and raised in Blakely, Georgia, and when my dad passed, we moved to Miami, Florida for a time. And I don't remember any of Miami, but I do remember when we moved into what was, I think was like a little mobile travel trailer or something on, I think it was the Wilson family that owned that little thing on Alice Street. And I think one of my uncles, one of my Gordon uncles, they lived nearby or something. Anyway, I remember that little place. It was just big enough for us. And then later, we moved to the corner of Alice and Franklin Street. It was a duplex. We didn't know that it was called that back then, but we lived on one side and the Austins lived on the other side. I think it was JT and Mabel Austin. She was called Two Shoe, if y'all remember. We lived on one side and they lived on the other side. And I don't remember the address. And then
16?
I don't remember the address right there on Alice Street. It may have been, I don't remember the house number.
I think it was 16.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll take your word for it. And then I was small then. I guess I'd started school, when we lived on the corner of Alice and Franklin. And then later we moved to Mixon Alley, which was like the next street over, heading west, I guess, on Franklin. And the school that you've already heard about, grades 1 through 3, Mrs. West was the principal and first grade teacher, and Mrs. Morris was the second and third grade teachers. And they had a partition between the first grade and the other two. And I think Ms. Morris had just had the second graders on one side of the room and the third graders on the other side of that big room. And I have warm memories of that. And my oldest sister started school first. She's older. And when she started first grade, I went with her. And because I was learning like the other kids, they put me in first grade. And I think I had to be 4 and a half because I turned 5 the following year in March. And I had such wonderful memories of that. I guess I was kind of a precocious kid and could speak well. And so first grade, I had the lead in the first grade play as Mary, Mary, Quite Contrary. And I was on stage the whole night. All the parents were there. And Cookie Potter was one of my schoolmates in first grade. And then from there, I went to Montana Street School. The building is still there for grades 4 through 6. But in the meantime, there was our church, New Bethel. I understand it was just called Bethel back then, I think my mother told me. And the church was so much a part of our life. We were involved in all of the little organizations at the church, like the Sunbeams and whatever else was there. And I remember the smell of honeysuckle growing around the church. I always have that memory, and I can almost smell the honeysuckle because when we'd go up to the church for practice or whatever, and I guess it was the spring, and the honeysuckles flowers were in bloom. And also remembering meeting my best friends, one of whom is sitting over there, Delois and Linda Daniels. when we were probably preschool. We didn't have free kindergarten back then, but our mothers became best friends, and later they moved into the other side of the house on Mixon Alley. So we were even closer then. And when I got to Montana Street, I guess my reputation preceded me because Miss Morris, she later became Mrs. Kinney until the day she passed away some years ago. She always, I said, was my best cheerleader. She told everybody about Elmaree and how smart she was. And so when I went to Montana, as I said, I guess my reputation preceded me, but then I was in a bigger pond. So I was just one of the smart kids over there. But I remember being in the 4th grade play there, and I guess, 5th and 6th grade, I'm not sure, I don't remember, but I do remember being in the 4th grade play. But looking back, I kind of thought, well, I thought I was all of that, but when you get into the bigger pond, where you just, one of the great kids. But Southside was great. It was community. I remember people you just felt loved by all of the adults in the neighborhood, at your church. When people started getting televisions, we could go to people's homes and watch television at night, because when we didn't have a TV initially. And people were it was just a village, the village that people talk about now, but we really had a village. Everybody knew everybody. You would run errands for the older people, and you always spoke. That's a Southern thing, but in our community, even now, it's very meaningful. You have to speak to each other. Even if you really don't know each other, you greet each other with with the nod of the head or whatever, but you always, good morning, good evening, whatever it was. And older people, you had respect and reverence for them. You never disrespected your elders. And I don't remember being whipped by neighbors, but they would tell on you. When we moved to the house on Mixon Alley, the Pope family lived. There were only 2 houses on Mixon Alley. The Pope family, Miss Emma Pope, was the matriarch of that family. And she was home all day, like, summertime. Most of the parents were at work. And we would play on the opposite side of our house so that she couldn't see what we were doing. And I think in that house we had, I think initially we had a fireplace, but at some point I think we had the iron wooden heater, and we would go to the William Morris Lumber Company with our little wagon and get wood to use in our wood stove or fireplace, whatever it was we used for heating. And so we had a lot of those pieces of wood that were cut like in blocks, maybe 6 inches long, 4 inches wide, something like that. And so I can remember one day we decided to build a house out of those blocks. So we laid it out. We had the kitchen, the living room, and the bedrooms and all. And I was always daring, so the kitchen had to have a stove. So I built a stove out of those wooden blocks. It was square. And then I decided, well, let's try it out. So I built a fire in the stove. And dummy, the wood caught on fire. And that was like, oh my goodness, this is burning. I should have known that. But anyway, had to get rid of the stove because we knew we would be in trouble by playing with fire. So the house was on, I guess you'd call brick pilings. You could go, as little children, we would go under the house. So what I did brilliantly was to throw those charred wooden blocks under the house. And luckily, thank God, it didn't catch on fire. It could have, well, I guess because it was dirt under there, that put out the smoldering fire. That was just one of the stupid things, that as a child I did. But we played and we had a good time. But if Mrs. Pope saw us, she would yell at us and she would tell on us. So that's why we played on the other side of the house where she couldn't see us. And we made our own toys because we didn't get a lot. We got things for Christmas. Maybe you'd get a doll and maybe, some fruit and a book. I always loved to read, so, but during the rest of the time, we made our own, and we had ice boxes back then. And when, I think it was Mr. Lampkin was the ice man, he would bring the ice, the big blocks of ice for your refrigerator, your ice box, and it had this twine around it that he would pick it up, and so we would take that twine and put it inside of a soda bottle, put the cap back on it, and that was a doll. And we could curl that twine like it was hair, so we would do that. That was one of the creative things that we did. And the other thing that we did, we'd make grass dolls. And I don't know if this was the wiregrass, but we would pull up a clump of grass, and the root was long enough sometimes to braid, and we'd make a grass doll out of that. We did all kinds of creative things because we didn't have other things to do, and we had to stay at home. We couldn't just roam around the neighborhood. We had to stay pretty much in our own yard. And a lot of times, most of the parents would be at work, and sometimes the other kids would come to our house because we couldn't go, to other people's houses. We had to stay home, and I had to watch my younger siblings too, until, my mother had to tell the other parents, look, you have to keep your kids at home because Elmaree is watching. She's supposed to be watching the other kids, and I was young myself, but I was responsible for them. And I can remember one day she left the three little ones on what I guess they call a pallet. They put a quilt down and put the young children, the babies down for a nap. And she left, and the kids in the neighborhood came to play. And it seems like it was just like that. She was back home. My mother was. I think about it now, I don't know how long a day it was, but I think now with those three little ones, they were probably not changed or not fed because I was outside playing with the other kids when I should have been watching them as I was supposed to. But I was a child myself, 7 or 8 years old with that responsibility. And so that's when mothers had to tell the neighbors not to allow their kids to come to our house because then I was distracted and not doing my duty. Yeah, my father had passed away. Yeah.
Okay.
So you said your mother worked
Yes.
When you lived in Southside.
Yes.
And do you recall what she worked doing?
She did housekeeping for white families.
And do you remember whereabouts she worked?
I don't remember the people that she worked for or where they lived. I don't.
Sure.
I don't remember it specifically.
And can you describe the house that you lived in?
Okay, both places were what we would call a duplex, two families, one on each side, on Alice and Franklin as well.
Can you describe the inside of either of those or both of those?
Okay, Alice Street, I think it was just 2 rooms. You walked in and that was your bedroom and living room combined. And then there was the kitchen, if I remember correctly.
Indoor plumbing or outdoor plumbing?
I think the bathroom was attached to the building, but you had to go outside because I believe both families use that. Well, it was just a toilet, I think. Now you had to, we had the tin tubs, you had to heat water to take baths in.
And where did you get water from? Was there a faucet?
There was a faucet, we call it the hydrant, which I think was outside as well, and you had to bring the water in. and heated. We had the iron, cast iron kettle, I remember, and you would heat the water in for your bath in the big tin tub.
Okay.
And I think on Alice, we had a kerosene stove in the kitchen. And I think it was the cast iron heater in the living area. And the kerosene stove sticks out because one time, somehow, I don't know what happened, but the flame from that kerosene stove went up to the ceiling and left a circle of like coal, fire up there. And I don't remember all the details, but I think I remember, I think my mother throwing water up, to put it out. That because it was a wooden house, and so that was one of the things on Alice. And then in Mixon Alley, I think it was the same. I think it was just 2 rooms. That big room, you had your beds, and that was your living area as well. And then the kitchen. And I think the toilet was outside, but attached to the building. So you went outside your back door to go into the toilet to use it. But I think we also had to heat water on the stove, and I don't remember exactly what kind of stove it was in the kitchen there on Mixon. But I think we had a fireplace for heating in that house, in that living bedroom area. Because I just remember, it seems like we had, again, we'd go to the lumber company to get the wood to put in the fireplace there.
And you said that you had to look after your younger siblings.
Yes.
How many people were in your family?
At the time, there were 5 of us, 5 girls, and my mother.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask if it was 5 children. and-
5
and your mom. Okay. And when you left Southside, where did you move to?
We moved to the Martin Homes on Tuskegee Street, and I think our address was 736 Tuskegee Street. I think they've changed the numbers over there now, but I think it was 736 Tuskegee Street at the time.
And the Martin homes, were they apartment-like buildings, or were they individual houses?
They're the same buildings that are there now. They've, done some remodeling or whatever, but they were just red brick, I believe, when we lived there. And I forgot how many units were in each row, but it's the same buildings that are there now. And we were close, Tuskegee, I think we were in that last group of apartments. And we were on the end. There was a big parking lot that you would turn into. And our building faced another building. Our friends, Delois and those, they lived on the end of that building. We lived on the end of this building, and there was a sidewalk in between. We had the living room and the kitchen and 3 bedrooms. And I was de facto oldest because my oldest sister is special needs. And so I guess my mother was giving me a little extra. I had the back bedroom. The middle bedroom was big. I think there were 2 beds in there. So the girls were in there, and then my mother had her own room, the front bedroom.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
When you were in the first grade play, where was that play held?
It was held at the school.
Say the first grade play was held.
The first grade play was held at the Southside Elementary School that I was attending. And it was in the school. There was a petition between the first grade and the second and third, but you could push that back and open it up. So they opened that petition up, so it was big enough for parents and all, yeah.
So parents attended that, this was
Oh,
in the
yes.
evening?
The kid, right.
Yeah. I think that's it for me.
Okay. Is it any one thing you want to tell us about your experience living on the South Side?
I think I pretty much covered it. As a child, a lot of things that I've learned since I didn't know then, but it was just wonderful as far as I was concerned. we didn't know that the places that we lived in were substandard housing at that time. Well, we knew that some of our neighbors had better homes, but it didn't seem to matter because we were all like family, like, you know, together. So there were no, as far as I knew as a child, there were no differences between any of us. We're, you know, some that had nicer houses or whatever. We all attended church together. We went to school together and all that. Just the warm, wonderful feeling. And by the way, my family was the last family to move from Southside because we were waiting for a place. And it was kind of scary because it was dark over there. And later, my mother was telling us, you know, how she was afraid because she's a woman alone with these children, and everybody had moved. And finally, we got the word that we got an apartment in the Martin Homes. So,
Let me ask you this about moving, since you were the last family to move out. Had the city or the contractors already been tearing down any of the other buildings by the time you moved?
I don't remember them tearing down anything before we left. I don't.
Okay. And I'm only asking that because